Hi, I'm Brent Johnson, and today we've come to Madison, Wisconsin, the capital of the state of Wisconsin. There are many organs in this city, old and new, and I'm excited to be able to bring some of them to you in the next coming weeks. So I hope you'll enjoy watching these. Our first one is a historic instrument, and to meet that instrument, we're going to join up with a familiar face. And joining us again is Dr. Andrew Schaeffer. Andrew has invited us to Madison and helped us organize this trip, and we're going to see several organs here. We're starting with this one at Luther Memorial. This is your church where you are organist, correct?
It is. I'm director of music, and I've been here since December of 2018.
All right, so you are here to tell us about this instrument right here. This is a J.W. Steere and Sons organ from 1895, is that correct?
1893.
1893, even earlier than that. But this church is not that old. Is this an older organ for the church, or where did this come from?
Yeah, it has quite an interesting history. It was built, the contract was signed in 1892 for the Fifth Presbyterian Church of Chicago. You've probably all heard of the Fourth Presbyterian Church of Chicago. Well, this is the one right after that one. It was a congregation that did not last very long. It actually closed about 7 years after this organ was installed. And that was kind of common especially in Chicago in the late 19th century, because they had just such a big population, and churches were on every corner, but a lot of them didn't last. So Fifth Presbyterian was one of those churches that didn't last. So this organ was homeless in around 1900, and it was purchased by the Millard Congregational Church of North Lawndale. It was the neighborhood in Chicago on kind of the southwest side, and it resided in that church up until 1995. And so this is the third home for this instrument, remarkably.
How did it get from north of Chicago to Madison, Wisconsin?
Sure. This organ was largely forgotten, actually, by much of the Chicago organ community throughout much of the 20th century, especially in the organ reform movement. Instruments like this were just not as revered as they are today. So the legend goes that Alan Loftman, who used to run the Organ Clearinghouse, and Bill Van Pelt, who, if you're an OHS member, you've no doubt seen some of his recordings and photographs. But they were driving around Chicago, taking photographs and documenting organs for an upcoming OHS convention in the early 1980s. And they were driving through Lawndale, and they saw this beautiful little congregational church sitting on the corner, I think, of Central Park Avenue and 35th Street. And they said, I wonder what's in there. They saw a car near the parking lot, and so they knocked on the door and walked in the church to see this totally unaltered, untouched J.W. Steere organ that was in rough shape, but it was still playing.
Just happened to stop in and see it there.
It happened to stop in, and wow. That's the story of how it really kind of got rescued. And so the Organ Historical Society of Chicago, I think, featured it at that upcoming convention. They made some plans, and they certainly had a lot of concerts to try to raise awareness of just how special this organ is.
Okay.
The Millard Congregational Church tried to hang on. North Lawndale, if you know your Chicago streets, is a pretty rough area of town, especially in the 1990s. It was a rough area of the city. So the congregation, unfortunately, folded in the mid-1990s, and that's when this organ came available.
And so what steps brought it here to Luther Memorial then?
Sure. Well, we have a beautiful church. It was built in 1923, and by the 1990s, it was in need of serious renovations, restoration. There were 2 transept balconies, and in fact, our previous Moeller organ was in one of them in the choir. The congregation, when they were doing these renovations, met with the fire marshal, and the fire marshal said, well, if you're going to do some renovations, you can't use these balconies anymore because there's only one source of egress, and they're too high up to do anything else. But they were left with this kind of cavity in the nave. And so actually it was the pastor at the time, Pastor Harvey Peters, who was overseeing the renovations. He kind of got this idea, had been kind of toyed, well, maybe we should get a second organ for the space. And John Chappell Stowe, who's a UW professor and also a longtime member at our church here, my esteemed predecessor Bruce Bankson, and Pastor Harvey Peters kind of formed a little committee to look at our options. And I think Chappie got the idea, why don't we look for a used instrument? So they called up Alan Loftman and said, what have you got for us? Here are our dimensions. Alan gave them, I think, about a dozen instruments around the Midwest that were looking for homes, and this one was one of them. And so Harvey Peters, Chappie, and Bruce got in the car and drove to the Miller Congregational Church one Saturday, and it was love at first sight. They saw it, and it was just one of those magical moments where the 3 of them looked at each other and said, this is it. And so they didn't look at any other organs. This was the organ for us, and I think personally they did a fantastic job picking it out.
Well, it looks wonderful in the space. Did it need much restoration before it was playing again?
It was, I said, in totally original condition, which was really great, but it was in really rough shape. So yeah, it really did need a lot of work. So it was decided very early on, because of its historic nature and because it had the potential for a museum quality restoration, that we would undertake a museum quality restoration. So we engaged a fabulous organ builder in near Appleton, Wisconsin. His name is Jim Taylor, and he has experience restoring a lot of different instruments, 19th century instruments, and he apprenticed with Andover back when that company was first getting started. So he did a lot of work on the East Coast restoring instruments. So he took on this project, and it was completely restored here in Wisconsin. And all he did was refinish the case, repair all the pipework that needed to, re-leather the bellows, and it was good to go for another 100 years.
Wonderful. So we're hearing the original tonal.
You are, and if you look at the key desk, you'll see that there are scuff marks, and it wasn't. The idea was not to make it sparkle. It was to show this is a historic organ. It's been in 3 homes, but let's clean it up and get it so it mechanically functions in tip-top shape.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear that story and hear how it came here. Like I said, it looks fabulous in the room. They did an amazing job, especially with the stenciled facade. Is beautiful in here. It really distinguishes the organ.
That was actually. We think those are the original colors for the organ. It was painted white, I believe, in the Miller Congregational Church at some point in the organ's history, with some gold leaf around the mouths. Jim Taylor didn't do the stenciling himself. He hired one of the world's foremost Victorian pipe stencilers. Her name is Mary Lou Davis. She's still around in Connecticut, and so she came down to Madison and recreated this paint scheme.
Well, let's talk about the sounds of this organ. We've talked about it a bit. I want to hear some of it. How many ranks do we have? 19. Okay, 19 ranks, and most of them are in one big box, correct?
Correct.
And then there's some that are outside.
Right. So there are only 4 stops that are outside of the gigantic Swell box, and that's the 2 pedal stops, and then the great Borden 16, and then the great open diapason.
Well, let's start with that great open diapason, because I know some of that's right here in the facade.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hear what that sounds like.
pretty big,
It's a big
8-foot
woolly
diapason. It's but that was really characteristic of organs at the time,
Yeah.
and
It
so
sounds like 1890s.
it sounds like 1890s. And so the idea was that it was not a vertical chorus necessarily, although as you'll hear as we go up the stops, it is capable of that. But the idea is that you put the open diapason out in front of the swell box, you push it really far, and make it really kind of envelop. And when you get the full organ going and you pull on that 8-foot open diapason, it will soar over the rest of the organ. So that's how they really pushed the sound out into the room. Because again, you didn't have copious amount of wind. This organ was really hand pumped, and later it had a water motor. And so, you had to conserve wind. And so this was kind of one of their ways of working around that.
Well, also outside, we have kind of going in the other direction. There's a 16-foot Borden, which is not nearly as big, is it?
No, it's very skinny scale.
Sure.
And I will apologize, those stoppers love
Of course.
to slip.
It is the middle of summer.
It is the middle of
things are
summer,
different.
so-
But that's a very colorful Borden for usually
is.
an organ like this, the 16-foot Borden. And I assume the pedal will probably be more like that. It's kind of a big, tubby, dark, but that's a
Yeah.
very colorful manual stop.
Yeah, you definitely, in the two Bordens here on this organ, you have the three little bear syndrome. One is way too hot, one is way too cold, and so we're sort of missing the one that's just right, but we love this organ all the same.
Well, let's keep going up the great chorus now. We've got the great open, and let's add the 4-foot octave to it and see how that...
Here's the octave by itself. A bit smaller scale than the
But it's
eight.
still pretty dark and covered.
Yeah. We also have a 12th that's principal scaled. The 15th. And then we also have a 16-foot board. We'll add to it. Really love that Borden because it's light enough that you can really kind of slip it in there and just add this nice grand sound.
There's a lot of brightness there, but that 8-foot open diapason is definitely dominating the chorus. So if we wanted a different sort of sound, what other 8-foot options do we have in this division?
Sure. Well, I'm actually I'll keep the same chorus on and pull out the Melodia and the Dulciana, which together can sort of make a little small principal. And here's how much lighter it will sound. So,
Yeah.
you can tell just how massive that principal is.
Play that flute for me. I want to hear that flute by itself.
Sure. This is a charming stop. That's a stop. There's a legend. Maybe I shouldn't say this on film, but I'm going to anyway. Sainted Fritz Nowak, back in the early days of the organ reform movement, used to take up old Wangren, Moeller, Wicks Melodias, chop them up, and use them as kindle for his barbecue. And they're sometimes for good reason. Melodias were kind of ubiquitous, and this organ proves that they were around prior to the 1920s when they were found at every organ in the Great Division. There's a lot of really ho-hum melodias out there, but this one really shows the potential of a good melodia to really just kind
It's
of,
very colorful and sings
Yeah.
out very nicely. And then the Dulciana that you had on with it, let's hear that Dulciana by itself.
with the box closed.
And it's very soft, but I can see how it adds that brightness to the melodia to give you a little more of a principal sound, a small
Yeah.
principal.
Here they are together.
It just kind of sounds like a brighter flute at that
Yeah,
point.
right, yeah, exactly.
What else do we have?
And a flute d'humour at 4 foot, which
Okay,
is
4 foot
mostly a wooden stop flute through most of its compass, and then it transitions to open flues somewhere up here. This is such a charming stop. I'm going to add it with the melodia. Just sparkles.
It's amazing compared to those dark diapasons how bright and colorful the
Yeah.
flutes come out to be. And frequently
Absolutely.
on modern organs, it's kind of the other way around, and back then they
Exactly.
were getting the color from those darker stops. So yeah, that's
Right.
interesting. So that's all the flues in this division, correct? And so we have one reed. Tell me about that.
Clarinet, actually, it's only tenor C on up.
Okay.
So I'll play up the compass here. So it's not quite as sort of broad and woolly as you would expect
It sounds pretty skinny.
a Kimball or a Skinner clarinet to be. It's pretty skinny scale, but you can combine it with the melodia to make a really nice color stop.
Yeah, definitely very, very buzzy and pretty.
Yeah.
But it cuts through the very well. Again, more bright colors against some of those big, darker, heavier ones. So
Right.
there's definitely places to find brightness in this organ.
And actually, the clarinet does play well with others. I mean, it's sort of a nice little read to the chorus. So I'll play that out. Here's without, so you can remember.
Yeah, very nice. You can hear it just adds that extra
Just a little
layer.
ping, right? Yeah.
Well, let's come over to the swell now.
Sure.
And tell me what we've got over here.
So we actually have an 8-foot open diapason, but the bottom octave is stopped. It's actually a zinc metal pipe with a stopper in it.
Instead of a wooden stop pipe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's sort of quinty in the bass, but I'll work my way up, and you can definitely hear where it transitions.
That's a much brighter, smaller scale diapason than the great.
Yeah.
It makes me, just curiosity, the 4-foot octave in the great, if you play it down an octave, how does it compare with the swell?
Sure.
They're very similar, so it's the swell is starting out a scale or so smaller, just like
Right,
the 4-foot.
exactly.
Okay. So coming up from there, what else do we have?
We actually have 2 strings, a solitional at 8 foot. I mean, just a little bit of speech problems at this point. And then we also have an aeoline at 8-foot pitch, in case that solutional wasn't soft enough for you. I'll add that the solutional and the aeoline share a common octave.
Okay.
The bottom there.
That is a very soft stop, and I imagine with the box closed, it's possibly inaudible over traffic noise.
Correct. Here, let's see. So,
It cuts through a little bit.
so you know, in playing these stops, it really goes to show you how much quieter things were in 1893, even in the city of Chicago. Luther Memorial sits on University Avenue, which is one of the main thoroughfares through town. We are actually in the middle of the UW campus, which has, I don't know, 20,000 students. So it is not a quiet location. Construction noise, street noise, bus noise is a part of our daily life here.
Some concrete being poured, I think.
Yeah, we haven't had any recording sessions here for a long time because of that. So yeah, it's tough to hear it, but you can just imagine how much quieter everything was in the 1890s. The other thing to keep in mind is that this organ did not accompany a large choir by any stretch of the imagination. Soloists and quartets, and so you didn't need broader stops. I mean, you needed these quiet colors to shade what you were doing. And it's worth pointing out on this organ that there is no celeste. The aeoline is tuned in unison. I'm sure the temptation has always been there to make it into a celeste. That's what's happened on a lot of organs that have two strings.
But it would have been tuned unison originally.
Tuned, and we stuck to our guns. And I'll be damned if that becomes a celeste under my watch.
Sure.
And it's really not the right scale for a celeste anyway.
It's a little different sound than the solutional anyway. It's a little smaller and doesn't quite have the power to compete and actually work. Like
Correct. And this actually is pretty characteristic. Most all 19th century American organs did not have a celeste, especially organs of this size. Celeste really didn't take off until, the Italians had them, of course, in Voce Umanas long time ago, but and it wasn't until Cavaillé-Coll really drove that home, and then it really took off in the 20th century. So this is just a little too old to have a celeste.
What else is we have in there?
Well, while we're on the string family, I'll add that we have a violina at 4 foot. This is another one we're going to have trouble listening to over the bus, but we'll try it. And now here it is with the aeoline and the solutional. And I'm going to jump a stop and add the stop diapason so that you can hear how nicely it just kind of adds this little bit of brilliance to this kind of flue work.
Yeah, and that's a sound that just makes me think early American.
Yeah.
That the flutes with the strings brightening it up on top. That's distinctive sounds.
It's as early American as Clarence Eddy, who was the one who dedicated this organ.
Oh wow! Really?
Back when it was brand new at Fifth Presbyterian.
Oh my gosh! All right, so go back to that stop diapason. I want to hear it by itself though, and see what we were working with. got a lot of color at the top. Down lower, it's pretty dark, and it almost needs those strings to bring it to life, to give it a little extra punch.
And here are the strings. Here's the solutional with that, and again, it's that quintessential American sound.
Very nice. And then we have, just to go up from here,
Flute harmonique at 4 foot.
Okay.
This is a really charming stop. It's one of my favorites.
That's lovely. Throughout the compass, it's just wonderful sound all the way through.
And here it is with the stopped diapason. And here it is in contrast with the grate. So a pretty clever design. The 8 foot on the Swell is stopped wood. The 4 foot is open metal, and then it's reversed on the grate. The open wood for the 8 foot, and then stopped wood for the 4 foot. So here they are contrasting each other.
It's very different. They're still useful and have their characteristic sounds, but they're very different in those being open and closed like that. Yeah.
And then we have the flute family. We have a flautino, which I can't quite figure out what it wants to be. I don't know if it has figured out what it wants to be, and that's okay. We love it all the same. So I'll play it, and I'll let the viewers maybe take a poll, whether it's kind of a principal or a flute. You're here, you're like, oh yeah, that's a flute, and then you get up here and you're like, is it?
It does brighten up, but I still feel like it's pretty fluty throughout.
Here it is with the 4. Here's the 15th in the grate with the 8 foot melody and the 4 foot flute.
Yeah, I definitely hear more flute qualities in the Swell 2 foot, but it brightens it up, and it just sits right in those 4 foot harmonics really well, and fills out that flute chorus.
One of the things that really made this attractive as an organ to the committee I spoke of earlier is that it did have, even though the 8 foot diapason is the dominant stop, it does have a chorus, and it does have enough brilliance really to make it a really versatile organ for lots of different literature, especially for liturgy playing, which is what this organ is here to do.
Right. Yeah.
So the last stop in the Swell division is the Swell 8 foot oboe, and then the bassoon. Common practice, late 19th century organs, to have a double draw. It's not a double draw, I'm sorry, but to have 2 separate knobs for the stop. It's very colorful little oboe.
Nice little thin sound, but very bright. So that's everything in the swell then, correct?
Correct.
So now we have 2 pedal stops that are on either side of the swell box.
Correct.
So tell me what we've got. We've got, I know, a 16-foot boarding we talked about.
Yes. So here we go.
It's pretty big.
Humongous boarding.
Compared to that great 16-foot.
And we are one of the churches in the United States that has an acoustic that actually favors bass, not higher frequencies, which is awesome. But the ways the walls work in here, it like just amplifies that boarding. So it really dominates. And that was the thing to do. Of course,
Sure, yeah.
when real estate was tough. So, I mean, I'll play it with the chorus, and you can hear how it really undergirds it nicely. So it works well with that. However, when you want to go to the plethora of quiet stops in the swell, you have a little bit of a problem on your hands. It works, but it's a little heavy. My trick is to
So can you couple the great 16
is to
down?
just do that.
Yeah.
You don't have anything to solo out. And actually, if you, depending on what you're playing, you really have to plan ahead. But you can use the board and bass 16, the clarinet, and then you get the best of both worlds. You get
Because you're splitting the
the
great.
board in, and then you get the clarinet.
Yeah, so somebody was thinking there, I think.
So you was thinking, but you have to be real careful and play. Don't hand register this on the fly on a Sunday morning. You gotta think through the whole piece. And then a violoncello at 8. Here they are together.
Great string sound, as we were discussing on the Willis Wicks organ that we saw recently, that violons in the pedal sometimes was used as a solo stop in some ways as against accompaniment. So you wanted something that was bright and cutting through the bass. So.
Yeah. And this does not pretend to be a schnicker. It does not have an independent pedal division besides those 2 stops, and so it relies solely on the couplers to add the necessary brightness down there.
And as you said, this was mostly used for accompanying.
Right.
You just needed to help the basses along a little bit, maybe.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
keep them bright.
Exactly.
And the pedal board is not AGO standard. It predates this a bit. So how many pedals do we have?
We actually are 5 short of.
There are 32 notes.
Of 32 notes.
This goes up to D, is it?
Yes, exactly.
And it's not radiating and curved.
It's flat but concave.
So it's
Slightly concave.
slightly curved on the outside, closer to you on the outside, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And so this was sort of a Steere design, and as probably some of your viewers know, it really wasn't until the 1930s that the organ builders got together and said, okay, we got to cut this out for people and decide. And they used actually Austin and Skinner consoles as kind of the gold standard of, okay, what's going to be most comfortable. So yeah, it's got a steep learning curve for the pedal board.
And are those spoons then, they duplicate your couplers?
Not really. One of them does, and this is the great to pedal.
Okay, that's right there on top.
And then we also have a piano and a forte.
Oh, so those are combination.
It's the piano,
Right.
and then brings in the
It brings
forte.
on everything.
Yeah.
And it's just on the grate.
Just on the grate.
Okay.
So, and no multiple memory levels, which is shocking for an organ.
Imagine that.
But it's compact enough that you can hand register things. Sometimes you have an assistant, and with this organ, um, you can't fight it. I mean, it does what it does extremely well, and it can play Bach. It can. You know, you're looking to play Rager Wacket Auf on it, like maybe the little Wacket Auf, but not the Chorale Fantasy.
You know your limitations. That's
It's and if you go into it with kind of a clear head, saying, okay, this is what I can play, and as a supplemental organ to a large organ, they can play all that stuff.
Well, like I said, we're down here in the nave of the church in the crossing, as it were. What do you use this for here at Lutheran Memorial?
Well, actually, it gets a lot of use throughout the week, I'm happy to say. We have 2 services a Sunday morning, and the 8 o'clock service is much more intimate. People tend to sit sort of towards the front, and no choir at that service. And so I use this organ every single week at 8 o'clock. It does an admirable job, and I have so enjoyed getting to know it as a liturgical organ, because I am constantly discovering little tricks here and there that make this organ a lot more versatile than it would look normally on paper. It's a real testament to Steere.
So not only is the pedal board short, but the manuals are shorter compass too than our usual 61 notes.
Correct, yeah. It goes all the way to A.
Okay. Tell me about the little device I'm seeing over there.
Yeah, this is really handy, actually. This is a wind indicator, and so when the white is all the way almost to the left, it shows me that the bellows are completely full. And if I were to play a big chord, it would go down. And when this organ was hand pumped, it was a way for the organist to know, okay, we're ready to start the hymn. We have enough wind in the reservoir. Make sure that the organ doesn't bottom out, which you can do. The organ does have an electric blower now, obviously. We're not paying anyone to pump right now. And that was done in Chicago, but we replaced the blower when it was moved to Lutheran Memorial. It's helpful just knowing so that it doesn't bottom out.
Did it have a signal originally somewhere, a Calcant knob to tell the blowers, hey, it's time to go pump the thing up a bit?
It may have. If it did, it's missing. There's also this little tiny switch over here. I'm not sure if that was for a now removed electric system, lights or something like that in the church, but it's possible something was in that.
Well, and as you said, it had a water motor at some point too, so the blower wasn't necessarily all that important for so long.
Yeah, so the bellows lasted until just several years, and then actually you can see the scar right behind you of where you would turn it. Yeah, and water would come up from the basement of the church, and not quite sure how the system worked, but Google is just a tab away.
Well, I tell you, it's something I've always been curious about, because I've never seen a water motor, but I've heard about it. And usually they would be down in the basement.
Right.
And then like a turning pole would come up. The water would all stay down, so you didn't have to deal with water actually coming into the organ, although it's possible they could have done that, but the water had to go somewhere.
Right.
And churches, back when water service first became a thing in cities, churches usually got free water. And so they could just turn on the water and let it run down the street, and it would power the organs until people said, wait a minute, that's a lot of water getting thrown away.
Yeah, and I like you, I've never seen a water motor functioning today. I don't get the sense that they were the most reliable things on the planet. I think, as you said, when churches got water service, it was a real novelty. How can we harness this new power in a unique way? So it was short-lived, and the blower, I think, came as early as the 20s. I mean, Chicago had electricity. Certainly, this is in an urban setting. So,
well, since you know so much about the history of this instrument, it was built by J.W. Steere and Sons, who were in, as it says right there, Springfield, Massachusetts. Tell me what you know about that company.
Some people may know that company as Steere and Turner, and that's actually John Steere and George Turner. They were partners. Turner left in, I believe, 1891. Some OHS people watching can comment and correct me on the year. He left shortly before this organ was actually built. Actually, I think a year before this organ was contracted. So when Turner left the partnership, Steere Sons came on board, and hence J.W. Steere and Son. J.W. Steere and Son made the transition to electricity in the early 20th century. Actually, one of the most famous Steere organs is Wolsey Hall at Yale. It was a Hutchings, and then in 1915, I believe, J.W. Steere rebuilt it and added on, and then later Skinner. The fact that Skinner rebuilt Wolsey Hall is very telling, because the Steere company was actually bought out by Skinner in, I believe, 1920. So that was sort of the end. I believe the company was from 1870 to about 1920.
Okay. Well, you said the organ's been really lovingly restored. The bellows have been restored too for hand pumping it, correct?
Absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah.
I gotta go try those out.
Sure. All right.
All right. Oh. There yet?
No. You're getting there. I'll tell you. All right, we're there.
Okay. So this organ is very compact and it's easy to get to everything. The back is completely open. You see pedal pipes on the side, and then most of the pipes are contained in that box right there. All accessible by this ladder. There's the new blower on the floor there and the switch for it. And all of that feeds this very large double rise regulator. Here's a look at our stop action. Here's our tremolo on the wind line. Our all-important OHS certificate. And then more pedal pipes over here on the other side of the case. Another look at the regulator and some of the weights, and there's the feeder pump handle. Andrew was kind enough to go up and open up the swell box for us. Once inside, we can peek in. We're looking in the door here. You can see it's crammed full of pipes, with a big step down to the floor once you're inside. Here we are in, looking out through the shades. The bottom octave is divided so that the lowest pipes are on either end. You can see the start of our clarinet there that starts at tenor C. Doesn't quite go all the way down. The great pipes are in the front, and then the swell pipes are on the back chest. All mitered to fit under the ceiling. A few offset pipes here. There's our stop diapasons there that are metal pipes with round stoppers in them. Look at that very skinny clarinet. And there's outside is the 16-foot Borden in the first open diapason. You can see how small scale that 16-foot is. Apparently there were some changes made at some point to the wind chest. There's some holes covered up there. We've got the same thing on the other end of the chest. Don't know what that was about, because there's no holes in the rack board for pipes. Maybe they thought there was going to be pipes in the beginning and then changed their mind. There's our pedal pipes, and we're on our way back out. Thank you, Andrew, for showing us the lovely 1893 Steere here at Luther Memorial Church in Madison, Wisconsin. Now, astute viewers may have noticed that you mentioned another organ here in the church.
Actually, we have two other organs in the church. One of them is a little portative by Gene Bedient. It was actually the first portative that he ever built in 1986. It's currently in the closet over there, but and then the elephant in the room, the Austin Opus 2449 from 1966.
How many ranks is that instrument?
It has 56.
56. So it's a big Austin organ, and a lot of you are probably saying, why aren't you going back and showing us the Austin organ? We're in Madison for a few days. We've got a lot of organs to see. And in fact, the very next instrument we're going to is another Austin, a little bit newer than this one, but very similar in size. And so we're going to take you to that one instead, and we have a whole variety of instruments that we want you to see. So make sure you're subscribed to our channel and click the little bell for notifications. And Andrew might even make another appearance here before the run is out.
Or two.
I hope so, because he's very knowledgeable, and it's great listening to him talk about these instruments, and you know a lot of Madison instruments very well at this point. So remember, for streaming classical organ music 24 hours a day, visit our 3 streaming stations, OrganLive.com, Positively Baroque, and The Organ Experience. If you would like to become a sponsor of the Organ Media Foundation and help us make more videos like this one, you can do that by going to organ.media and click on support. For now, I'll see you at another Madison Organ. Take care. Bye.